Well, good evening. I'm just sitting here, didn't have anything planned to share at the moment, and I started looking at a verse here in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. If you remember back in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, that was the chapter where Paul had been through so much. He had been whipped, he had been beat, he had been tortured, he was snake bit, he knew what hunger was. There's so many things that this man Paul had went through. And I was looking at chapter 12, and I guess I'll pick up maybe in verse 7. It says, "And least I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh." Now, we don't know what kind of actual thorn that it actually was. Paul's vision was getting weak. There was a lot of things that Paul was going through at the time. And we don't really know what that thorn was, but that thorn was not an actual stick in his side, even though that it was painful, and even though that it hurt. The messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. See, he mentions that where this thorn came from, Satan was allowed to buffet. That word buffet means to slap around or to beat up or to beat around, to abuse, to take abuse. And Satan, that's his job, is to abuse if he can. And then if you notice verse number 8, "For this thing I besought the Lord 3 times. That word thrice is 3 times. He sought the Lord 3 times. Now think of the first time that he sought the Lord. Was the pain hurting him then? Yes. And then no doubt he probably waited for a little while and then he sought the Lord again. Was that pain still hurting him at that time? Yes. Could it have got a little bit worse? It very well could have. Then he goes to the Lord and seeks him the 3rd time. And is the pain any worse now than it was the first time or the second time? Probably. "For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me." He wanted it gone. Whatever that thorn was, whatever that issue was, he wanted that pain to go away. Now you got to remember, if you go into chapter 11, you will see all of the things that he faced over there. I could go over there right now. I'm just looking at this one. I'll use this one verse. I think it's verse 26. Let me back up. Verse 25. "Thrice was I beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeyings often. In perils of waters. In perils of robbers. In perils of my own countrymen." See, he couldn't even trust his own countrymen. "In perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings often." He couldn't even go to sleep. He had to watch out for everything that went on in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. And beside those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of the churches. And see, we're reading over here where this man Paul is praying for God to take away this pain that he's suffering. But listen to what the Lord said to him. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Now, do you think God knew that he was going to go through all them things that I just read? Do you think that God was so wise to know that he was going to go through all of these things that I'm pointing to over here, all the way down? And then he talks about the care of the churches. You know what? God knew all that he was going through over here. He was allowing him to be hardened. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is God was allowing the things that he was having to face over there in chapter 11 to make him tough. God wanted to make him tough. You know, the reason that God allows us to go through things at times is to make us tough. To make us understand. You know, when they take a young guy to the military, whether it be a woman or a man, they make that individual tough. You know what they do? They break that individual down. In the 8 weeks of boot camp, they're saying yes sir and no sir. They are having spit in their face. They are being yelled at. They are being abused. They are just being mocked over. But you know what? When the 8 weeks is up and they get their stripes and they get their uniform and they get their look, you know what? They're proud to be in the service. Most people would say they are proud to be in the service. And you know what he said right here? For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. See, God's grace is sufficient. We can go over there right now and read over there in Ephesians 2, 8 and 9. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. See, when we think that we are going to impress God, that's when we don't impress God. These red letter verses right here in verse 9 of chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians, my grace is sufficient. You know why I know it was sufficient? I don't know where it is, but I know it's in the Bible. That there's a verse somewhere that talks about grace is renewed every morning. God's mercy is renewed every morning. You know what that means? That means that regardless of what you go through, that grace is sufficient. What Jesus was telling him here, my grace is sufficient. My grace is enough. What you need to do is you need to depend on me, because my grace is sufficient. Not only was it sufficient, it was all in the world that this man Paul needed to make it through another day. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. See, God got glory in all of that Paul had went through in chapter 11. He got glory in that. God looked down and saw a man that was getting tough. He was making him tough. When he said the words that he said back in in the book of Acts, when he said, Lord, what would you have me to do? God knew that he was going to make him tough. What would you have me to do? God got his attention. And you got to remember now, this man named Saul was pretty much of a heathen at one time. Even though he knew religion, he knew religion very well, but in the eyes of God, he was a pretty bad man. But he told the Lord, what would you have me to do? What do you want me to do? For my strength is made perfect in weakness. The next time you think that you're going through something that is so difficult, just know that God has a reward waiting when that difficulty is past. God will give you a blessing that you will have no room to receive all of it. You will look back at all of your pains and suffering, and you will thank God for every one of them. I thank God that I have a quality time and an opportunity time to come out and just open my Bible and look down at a verse and begin to start talking about the verse. You know, if any of my videos would bless someone, I would love for you to share it with them. I don't come out here to take up money or to take up offering. I certainly don't come out here in nice clothing. If y'all could see this place right now that I'm sitting in, you'd probably feel sorry for me. But you know what? I get a lot of peace out in this little place out here, because I'm talking to the world. I'm talking to people that might not know Jesus. And I'm telling you that whatever he puts you through, he's going to make you tough. But he said he would never leave us and he would never forsake us. He would go with us all the way to the very end for his child. Thank you for watching.